Hey everybody, how's it going? Thanks so much for joining me. You got to let me know if this is working today, because I got feedback from LinkedIn saying everything should be good. Everything from StreamYard looks like it's working as well. So thanks so much. If anybody can just go ahead and post a comment to let me know, or shoot me a text, let me know that this is on and live. That would be great. But as far as I can see from this side, it's awesome. Typically what we'll do at the beginning of the class is we'll kind of recap what we did last week, and I'll give you just a brief rundown of what it is that we talked about this week. Can't really do that because I would just show you like a big black square over here, because that's pretty much what we got last week, because we didn't really get a lot of time to interact. So what we're doing, thank you so much, Rodney, appreciate it. So thanks so much. So what we're going to do is today we're going to cover UX mapping. Now, what is user experience mapping, right? We hear about it in on web design, we hear about it in different areas, but we don't typically talk about it in packaging design. So it's so different. It's so different than an experience map that you use for as a web designer. You use it to like really compare the progress with all the different interactions that you're creating, right? So it's like a mirror when you design something to make sure that you're following a path. It's no different than a website, a product, if you're a product developer, and let's say like an actual map at like Disneyland, right? When they create that map at Disneyland, it's all illustrated beautifully, but if it doesn't allow you to walk from Small World to Captain EO, I don't even know if that still exists, or Star Wars, whatever, in a timely manner, then the map doesn't work. Same thing with packaging. Now, it lets you know what's going to happen at what time and when. So when you're designing packaging, and I'm going to show you some packaging, we're going to walk through it and kind of give you an idea of what I mean. But why is user experience mapping important? Two reasons. One, because if you're a designer, you're in sales. Whether you like it or not, you're in sales. And if you're in sales, then you're in sales. Number two is that it actually works, right? So let's look at each of those really quick. You are in sales. If you're a designer, you're definitely in sales. So here's the way that I came up with this process, and you can come up with your own version of this process, or you can find something else online. I'm sure somebody else has created this. I'm sure I'm not the first one. But what happened was I was sitting with a client years ago, and I was sitting across the table from them, and they had their design team and their purchasing team, and this was within a luxury brand. Now, they put me on the spot by asking me to give them my opinion, my thoughts on their packaging. So, this is years ago, and I'm sitting across from these designers that have an amazing pedigree. They've got tons of experience. They've worked at agencies that I've admired. They've developed packaging and branding and products that I've admired as a designer, and they're asking me for my input on their product. So, you take a moment and you look at the pack, and instead of looking at the design, I'm not going to give them my thoughts on like the kerning or the color selection. I don't know what their brief was and how they arrived at that solution, but what I am going to give them is my thoughts on their packaging by actually using it as a first-time user, the way that I experience it, and then I comment. So I work my way through the box, I go through the whole process, and then I explain, once I experience it, I come back and then I comment, and what I do is I explain each of the steps. And like, for example, if it was like this box here, I would show, well, my hands cover the branding at this position in the unboxing. The messaging is covered up by a secondary flap. So even though you've spent an amount of time to design and build this brand and package, the messaging is obscured by this flap. So it doesn't really help you. And then when I remove the product, there's some friction, there's a secondary adhesive. So like say, for example, it was e-commerce box. Sometimes there's adhesive on the front flap from tape residue, or if it's like a self-adhesive strip, there's a little bit of residue. And when I pulled the garment out, it hung up on that, right? And again, it's like all those little things that you may not be thinking of when you're designing packaging are what the consumer is going to experience. And this is the reason that it's important to map out the process and really work through the design after you've mapped it out. And of course, walking through that process with them, not focusing on the details of the design, but mostly on the packaging structure and the user experience. The thing that I learned was that there's a great deal of romance and storytelling and just the sensory delivery that happens in an unboxing. So from a brand's perspective, immediately they look to you as the expert in this packaging experience, because they've got experts in color and brand and tech, all these different things, but there's always like one missing piece in their arsenal, and that was it. So again, as a designer, immediately I became in sales because I was selling my service, and I was successful at it. I sold my service, but it was because I was filling a gap that they hadn't even considered. They didn't even know that that's what they were looking for. And it became just something really important to me. I've mapped it out. This is a big part of what I talk to students, to brands about, is how to map out the process. So we're going to go into that. But number one reason was that if you're a designer, you're in sales. Number two reason is because it works. So it works. That's as far as I'm going to go into it works. I'm going to show you how to do it. But first, I think we should both experience, or we should all experience some of these different boxes and packs, just to give you an idea of what this looks like before we get into the actual mapping. So I've got a few different products here. And this is the exact process I would go through. We've got some super generic packaging to some luxury products, and we'll kind of fill in the gaps here. This is just a really quick class, so I'm sure if you have any questions, put them in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. But let's take something super generic, right? Tylenol bottle. These have this little tab on the front that allows you to pop the top. So if I am part of this process, I would look at this and think, okay, so I see this on shelf. This is my first experience with the product. The only really thing that I need is to get into this bottle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it. I'm going to put my thumb right where that little notch is so that I can pop that open. But when I do that, what I'm seeing is the back. Now, I understand that at the volume that Tylenol delivers products and wraps labels on these products, it's unthinkable to think that they can wrap it so that the branding is here, where it's visible at this position. But if you're a startup, a lot of times startups are either hand labeling, or they're using smaller equipment to label that allows them to manually insert the jar, the container, to have it wrapped. These are the things that you would want to consider. When I grab it with my right hand to pop it open, I should see some branding and messaging here. Now, if I'm left-handed and I grab it this way, because we always got to give love to the left-handers, is, what do I see here? Should I see messaging, instructions, something really simple that includes some branding as well? But we want to think of both people, both types of people that use this. Then there's also additional types of people beyond, just right and left-handed. We have different disabilities, and for that matter, then I'm not the right person to make that decision. In that case, then we want to bring in people with a variety of disabilities to go through this user experience mapping as well, right? We don't want to design something for someone else without really having input from them. So that's part of the mapping, right? It's like step one, I see. Step two, I use. And step three is like, what do I see when I use it? And if we look at other types of packaging, like this here is skincare. And you've probably seen these. Being in packaging, you've probably seen these tubes. There's no identification to how you open it. There's this blue, this color on the top, and then you've got this. But what you do, you have to twist it, and this raises. And when that raises, that's great. Then you pump it like a normal product. This is from my buddy Justin. It's called Skin Better. This stuff works amazing, so definitely check them out. Shout out to Justin. But one of the things that you see with this is, all right, if I hand this to my mom's probably used a ton of skincare at this point in her life. But if I was to hand this to somebody new to buying skincare, would they know to twist this off, right? Would they be pulling? How do we identify this use case? And when we do it, this isn't like the sexiest thing. The way that I'm grabbing it, like to twist it, it feels like I'm doing one of those party poppers, like a gender reveal thing where they do that and the thing pops out. It needs to be a little smoother. This is a little tough because it's skincare, right? We want to apply it directly to our body, and it should feel soft and smooth and release the wrinkles and whatever else it's supposed to do. But like that hard twisting isn't something that you want to necessarily communicate. And it may just be that this product has been here for a while, but those are the things that you want to think about. And like when I'm doing this, like how much of the product am I covering? Like most of it. So it doesn't really offer branding. If I do it this way, should there be a texture here to get a little bit of grip? Should there be facets or something to provide some additional grip to open? Again, through that mapping, it allows you to do that. These guys, Dip, these guys were awesome. They sent some product to Unboxd, and they're using just a regular tuck box. One thing I love about tuck boxes is make sure that the front versus the back. If the tuck goes into the back, it never goes into the front, so you get a nice smooth rollover here. Now this box has locking tabs. You've got logo on the front, and with a product like this, I'm right-handed. I'm going to grab it with my left hand, and I'm going to see the back of it, right? Like I want to see the front of it, and then I want to see the back. So what's going to happen is I'm going to turn it around to see the back. For whatever reason, as a right-handed person, I'm going to rotate it counterclockwise. That means I see the front first. I see this second, but it's really on my way to the back. And then this is really what, the payoff that I'm looking for. So what should go on this panel as you're mapping this out? Should this be, branding and messaging and something that I really want you to read? Or should it be directions and something that, as a viewer, as a user, as I flip it, I see, directions, I want to get to the payoff and learn about the product, right? I don't want to stop them halfway through. I just want to get them to what they want to get to. And then they can come back and look at, and then on this side, we've got ingredients and all the other things that, at some point you're going to want to care about, but immediately you don't necessarily care about. And then if you're left-handed, I'm not left-handed. So I'm assuming you would probably rotate it the opposite way, but I can be completely wrong. And this is why you don't want to design for another group without really getting their feedback. Because here I would think, well, if I do it counterclockwise, if you're left-handed, it's got to be backwards. But we all know that that's not the case. So we want to make sure that we consider that. LMs, this is amazing product, but like if you open it, if I'm opening it, when I grab it, I cover this portion over here, which is okay. It's a little bit of branding that's happening here, but the logo isn't covered, right? That's always important to make sure that the logo is not covered. So when I open it, I reveal, I've got insert with the product here, and then I've got a logo debossed. So it's not taking too much attention away from the hero. And again, in your mapping process, you want to see like where your hands go, right? Because if you're grabbing something so small that you're grabbing it like this, and you're covering the logo and you're covering the messaging, you've got something here and you cover it with your thumb. Those are areas that you want to consider for maybe a redesign or rethought, rethinking the process. So what I want to do is I want to share with you my screen here, and we're going to go through just some mapping on a couple of die lines. And like I said, this class is just 15 minutes. So we've got like a little bit less than 60 seconds, but I'm going to stretch it out just a couple minutes to make sure that we get through this. Okay, so you should hear me and you should be able to see this iPad at this point. And when we talked about the dip soap, there was we had a logo in this area, which is great. That's a great position for it. No matter how you grab this box, you're going to see it. If it's on a shelf or a display unit, the display unit may cover a portion of this area here. So we want to make sure that we're considering that. And when you're designing packaging, you don't have to put in art. Like I just put in big blocks. So like this, for example, would be logo. This would be, secondary information that may get covered up depending on the type of display that unit that they're using at the store level. Different types of photography, you might end up covering this if you've got multiple boxes. For example, if you're doing marketing photography and you've got something like this laid out where it's like stacked, you may cover that, but what we don't want to miss is this piece. You always want to consider every use case. Then when we talked about like this being the first panel, make this disappear. Not too far. So this is, we've got logo. This is the first thing you're going to see on your way around. This is going to be the second panel you're going to see, but this is really the payoff. So when I grabbed that box, I had my big fat thumb covering this panel. And as I rotated, my index finger was kind of like in this direction over here. So I'm looking at what I'm covering, the areas that I'm covering. This is where I don't want to have critical communication. That doesn't mean that I don't want to have ingredients or regulatory, like that stuff's critical. But from a packaging design standpoint, we really know that it's all about the branding and the messaging. So we want to make sure that we've got secondary messaging here, some kind of brand message in this area, because it's not going to be covered regardless of how I pick that up. And then we've got the big payoff on the back. We've also got this panel. And when you open the box, the way that I do this is I want to make sure that I know how I'm laying out the artwork. This is going to be facing me. So I want to make sure that my text is in this direction. When I pop this lid open, I'm still going to be looking at this. This is still going to be facing me. So I want to make sure that this text would be in this direction, which if you turn the box around and you open it, this would end up being upside down. So that's that's going to be a call that you make. And it may be that you do a quick focus group on 10 different people and see how they open it, 9 different people, so that you get an uneven number and can kind of make a decision. On a small box, you will typically open it towards the front. On a larger box, then in that case, I would open it in this way. It's just kind of the way that it works. Now, these dust flaps, this is the way that you would put any copy on it. And as you can see, I'm mapping this out pretty quick here, but it's letting me know, or if I'm the packaging manufacturer or I'm on the packaging engineer, I'm handing this off to a designer that's going to be able to lay out artwork. So just real quick, again, if we're doing this box, when you grab it and you open it, I'm opening in this direction. So this was that flap. Right? If I'm opening it towards me, I'm going to read this direction. I'm going to read this direction. So you want to have some kind of secondary messaging, even if it's like a logo or some kind of icon, something that happens on this panel. You're paying for it, you're printing it, you may as well use it. When you look down here, if you're looking in this direction, then these are those two. You want to make sure that you're writing in the right orientation. That's always critical. I've seen a lot of boxes where somebody hasn't thought through that and they've received text that's upside down. Guys, so I really appreciate it. If you've got any questions, please jump into the comments. Robert, thank you so much. Well, yeah, exactly. A lot of designers jump right into aesthetics, and that's just, it's like you have to think about where people's hands are going. And I would take it a step further, and we can talk about this maybe next week, is who your users are, right? Your consumer is a user, but they're not the user. If you're doing fulfillment, you've got people at your distribution center, at your co-packers. These are also users. So make sure you're designing for them. And then if you work your way backwards, there's so many different users in your packaging supply chain that you really have to think about, and typically you don't. So we'll talk about that next week. Guys, thank you so much. I really appreciate you hopping on here with me. I'll be checking the comments. So if you have any more comments, please feel free to post them on here. I'm going to be checking and I'll comment back. I appreciate it. Thank you guys so much. Super stoked it worked this week. What a miracle. Thanks. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you soon.